Welcome to the second of my post-view series, where I take a closer look at the story of a video game and some of the surrounding concepts relevant to its world, instead of focusing on all of the rest. To not spoil the game, most reviewers who are aware their audience hasn't yet bought the game avoid talking about the story of a video game, but I want to take a different approach. I'll assume you've already played the game that I'm about to post-view, and I'll dive a little deeper into what makes a good story, and if the video game in question has succeeded or not to make one. Kind of like the brief conversation we have at the end of a movie screening about the movie. It's a time to share our thoughts and just get all nerdy about the world we've just been sucked into. So without further ado, I give you the post-view of Cyberpunk 2077, Beyond the Boundaries.
Hello there, Night City! Stanley here with you, and we got another day ahead of us in this city of dreams. Ooh, I love this town. Love it like you might love a mother who popped you out on the steps of an orphanage once and now stops you to ask if you got a smoke for her. Every new day here means 100 new arrivals, but only half these gonks will survive a year, and that's if it's a good one. And why do these peeps come to NC? Well, to be street samurai like Morgan, Blackhand, and Waylon Boa Boa. The greater the risk, the bigger the bounty, kids. Or so they say. But you can only be a Major League player for so long. The faster you live, the faster you burn out. If you don't get a bullet to the brain first.
Oh man, I just bought this game, and it's so buggy. You've all heard this by now, non-players who don't mind spoilers, and you've all experienced this by now, players who finished the game, and I just wanted to get this out of the way from the beginning, because although I'm not deaf to the community's problems with the game, I think that from patch 1.06 on PC onwards, released 2 weeks after the game release day, you have little enough to complain about that it shouldn't matter that much to your enjoyment of the story. Actually, some of the bugs are just plain funny, like those weird-ass palm trees. Look at those bad boys band. Trippy. I'm lucky enough to have a good rig, so my bugs were very limited, and I think the one that annoyed me the most, that I found out happened more frequently around my apartment in the mega building, was that I could suddenly no longer sprint, and if I took out a shotgun or a rifle, it would start firing automatically. Later on in the game, when I knew this would happen, I'd be able to control it, so I found a nice and quiet place I could just shoot the wall and not get any of those pedestrians freaked out. And boy, do they freak out for nothing. I'm not saying that if a crazy maniac is riding his bike on the pavement, that you gotta just ignore it, or that a dude jumping around in a nightclub won't startle you, but half the time, if you nudge these guys, they automatically assume they're gonna die and assume the crouch position, which I suppose makes things more comfortable. Shit's going down! To be fair, you do live in Night City, and this place is a nightmare. There's a shooting, robbery, or some other crime happening on every corner, and you can even choose to clean up the city if you want. And it's much more financially rewarding than the main missions, something I took a little time to notice. At one point, I just spent a few hours going after all the bad guys I could find, and I got enough in-game money to buy myself those sweet leg cyberware thingies that help you jump higher and float for a bit. Apparently, you can only get them from a super sleazebag that you have to treat as respectfully as possible in a previous mission. And if you chose to punch him in the face, he doesn't serve.
Well, come on.
Don't talk to her like that.
She insulted me!
So being a good guy pays off. Booyah in your face, suckers!
A little respect.
As in every game I play, I try to play the good guy. It just so happens most games coming out these days with any RPG elements to them that aren't JRPGs are all trying to be edgy bad guy games. But at least in this game, I got the feeling, unlike my experience with Red Dead Redemption 2, that the game was actually pushing me to be a good guy. You have a lot of options to be as cool as possible, to be kind, and you even get second chances sometimes. Like if you say something abrupt, you'll notice the game trying to push the conversation in a certain direction, usually a good one.
This is not the place to conduct business. Have some respect.
Then again, if your interactions with characters weren't mostly amicable, you would have no missions, and the game would be boring. So it makes sense to give players a chance to get back into other characters' good graces. But you can mess up, and conversely, you can be rewarded for making a choice you aren't particularly being pushed towards.
The fuck you doing? You lost it? He's beyond any sort of help.
However, there were moments when I didn't really understand what the abbreviated dialogue options meant, and what tone they were being spoken in, which made making choices confusing. It didn't happen so frequently I got irritated, but I definitely remember a couple times at the beginning, before I got to understand what kind of character V was, and his mannerisms, where I was annoyed by how a lot of choices hung in the balance of me understanding the right piece of dialogue correctly, which for some reason prompted me to think about how real that was in our world, that big decisions can result from small misunderstandings, or that the difference between someone liking you or not, even if you held similar opinions, was how you expressed them. I wondered about how V was this cool choom, the invented slang for guy in the game. And he had a lot of opportunities because he just speaks the language of all these other people, and they all understand each other.
Cops are like kids. Mommy and Daddy wouldn't let them go off in their lonesome.
All right. Can't be too careful.
While I, in the real world, feel like I struggle so much to get opportunities because I don't bond in very simple ways with people around me.
Say whatever the fuck you want, but just light up.
No.
Non-smokers are the fucking worst.
Say the wrong thing, and that's the difference between being given or refused a job, or earning a friendship, or not. And you can't just say what they want to hear, because they can sense when you don't really think it, most of the time. In real life, that is. In Cyberpunk 2077, it's a video game, and V obviously has a lot of opportunities, because it's a video game. Let's not over-philosophize things based on fake reality. Although I'm not completely socially unaware either. It seems most of the social awareness in this game that is really required is basic kindness and never refusing an alcoholic beverage.
Beer in the fridge if you want any.
Thanks.
This game makes you drink. And you know what's even worse? The effects only last 30 seconds, unless there's a scripted hangover. This is where you have to suspend your disbelief a little to truly appreciate that although this is a video game, and although it is buggy, you can still immerse yourself in the story.
You do this for the eddies, the wins, the glory? Why do you race?
You play as V, a mercenary trying to make it big in Night City, a mythical, fictional replacement for LA, it seems, in the year 2077. But bear in mind those dates were conjured up by the makers of the Cyberpunk 2077 tabletop RPG, way back when, I don't know, but a while ago. And as we've learned from the people in the 20th century who imagined the future, for instance, Back to the Future thinking 2015 was gonna have hoverboards, people rarely estimate when anything technological is going to happen correctly. This is why even now, as I listen to the Wachowskis and the Elon Musks and the Mikio Kakus of the world going on and on about the simulation and AIs and all that, I always take it with a grain of salt. After all, the smartest Newtons all thought physics had nothing more to offer before the first Einsteins came along, and then the Max Plancks, and the Niels Bohrs, and then what? Well, people who actually get that making a flying skateboard is much harder than you'd think. And yeah, once we've made the skateboard, maybe we can think about a proper AI. What challenges lie ahead? Who knows? V trying to make it to the top, become a legend, or whatever you want to call it, is the gist of the story until a job that's too good to be true goes wrong, and you and your best pal Jackie have to abort mission. And Jackie loses his life. This is actually kind of a sad moment, because I really like that chumo. That's chum in Spanish, I just made that up. Jackie dying actually does put a big dampener on the vibe of the game though. I was genuinely sad to have lost him. The job gone wrong involves stealing a special relic, an electronic chip that holds some mysterious information on it. Oh, by the way, the people in Night City are all half robots that can insert anything in themselves as data and can change almost any part of their body with robotic augmentations they call chrome, end parentheses continue. And to salvage what remains of the job and maintain the chip's integrity, V has to insert it into themselves and discovers, after being betrayed and shot by their fixer, the game's term for a broker for illicit jobs, that the chip actually contained the digitized copy of an old legend's consciousness, famous mercenary of Night City called Johnny Silverhand, that had been copied to the chip by his enemy, Saburo Arasaka, leader of the Arasaka Mega Corporation, the corporation you were trying to steal the chip from. During that mission, you witnessed the murder of Saburo, the man who, 50 years prior, and as punishment for what Johnny had done to Arasaka Tower, blown it up with a nuke, turned him into an engram and locked him away barely conscious as a digital form of himself. The game doesn't really address the difference between an actual person in the flesh and a digitized copy, an engram. And when they do, it all remains very vague.
All I know is your mind's gonna go.
And I can understand why, because in real life, we still can't really explain consciousness very well. And CD Projekt Red, the creators of this game, won't really know either, and will have to keep you guessing a bit if they're gonna make a game about it. And who murdered Saburo but his own son Yorinobu? And the fact that you witnessed this makes you, V, now pretty important too. Even if we weren't talking about having a copy of someone else's personality in your head, manifesting as a digital hallucination. And that's about it. Now, you must find a way to stop this digital copy overriding your own psyche. Something that is the chip's doing, not Johnny's by the way. And on with the game. As far as originality goes, well, it's an interesting take on an RPG. I can't say I was bored throughout the adventure. In fact, I was determined to save V. So the premise really does push you to enjoy the world you're in and engage with as many mechanics as possible. However, when you dilute this down to its core, this is a futuristic city kind of game. A very well-designed city, and I'm pretty sure CD Projekt Red took a very long time to get everything right, because, and I know this thanks to my booster jump legs, even the rooftops are designed with ventilations and the occasional garbage. Garbage is everywhere in Night City. And I saw a reviewer say, before I bought the game, that each section of the city feels like its own place, which is true to an extent. I spent about 66 hours in this game, and I went all over the city. And as with any city, and I know this from real world experience, it would truly take you years of searching to know a city. But a city is usually not only made unique by its varying architecture, but by its landmarks, which you spend time in. And this aspect of discovering the city is not pushed forward as much as it could have been. For instance, I remember well the parts of the city that involved meeting Mama Wells after Jackie Wells, your early game partner, has been killed, and you can go to his funeral. I remember well the afterlife and where it is on the map, but not really what's around. I remember well Carrie's mansion and where it is on the Hollywood Hills, the North Oak Hills. And I remember where the Aldecados Nomad Clan's camp is, before and after they moved. Because not only are those places designed differently, but they are brought to life by a unique memory, a unique moment in the story. Apart from that, only a few places, like that big round Japanese looking building, the district of Kabuki, Arasaka Tower, or the district of Pacifica with its giant roller coaster, truly stand out without a reason to. Because it's a city, and cities are a little boring. They're pretty square most of the time, and all the best places in a video game are probably designed to be integrated into the story or an important mission. I think this is a little how the developers intended it. There's just no way to make a city out of nothing without creating filler streets that aren't that important. But realizing this is not a game breaker. It's a cool city, but that's it. After 15 hours of gameplay, you're used to it, and nothing really takes your breath away. I imagine what I'm feeling now is the same as New Yorkers shaking their heads or just plain ignoring all the tourists all looking up at the tall buildings in wonder. And you know, I've never seen New York, so I'm gonna be one of those gawkers one day. And then 15 hours of gameplay later, I'll be over it. The way a city builds is through history. And I'm not sure any game developers or tabletop RPG makers truly went method actor on this one. How was this city built? Who started it? Why are people sticking around if it's a murder capital? The game is trying to sell you this idea that, hey, everybody just sorta is desperate and the future sucks and most people in Night City are asses and criminals. But actually, it's a normal city filled with vendors and regular pedestrians, all afraid of guns going off, like most regular people, and people who want to put food on the table. So why would you stay there? I'm unsure of what I'm saying, and perhaps there is an extensive lore as to why the city is built the way it is. But to me, it just feels like a futuristic version of what we currently have now. And by futuristic, I mean the 2015 hoverboard kind of futuristic. Not very likely to be accurate. But then again, this is a game, and as long as you're not trying to sell this off as being super realistic, I don't see why I wouldn't suspend my disbelief again. I mean, replacing all your body with cyberware is not realistic either, especially in 2077, as I'm pretty sure religious people would be against it. Although, I did appreciate the one Ripper Doc, the cyberware surgeon, who was like, "Beware the solar flares. We could get one any time and every electronic device will be fried."
Until the day this planet gets hit by a massive solar flare. I'm talking about a geomagnetic storm that wipes out all live circuit systems.
And I actually watched a video on YouTube lately that seems to be saying powerful coronal mass ejections are more frequent than we think in our own real world. And so, in this game world, are liable to fry everyone. So chalking up the frenzy for cyber modification to YOLO 'cause Night City is a bit meh as far as explanations go. But again, this is a game. However, I'm tired of just saying, hey, forgive things 'cause they games, yo. Although this is a tribute to a classic tabletop cyberpunk genre RPG, even if I don't mind so much the crazy aspects of it, I do wish a little more attention was given to actual people mechanics, as well as game ones.
Dunno. Hard to ruminate on that when you got a fucking time bomb lodged in your head.
If it's any consolation, fucking Time Bomb feels shitty about it too.
I know, Johnny. Come on. Let's ghost.
Because that's what sells you the experience. If people are believable, then the world becomes believable. And given the premise, the main story people are believable, but only given the hard to believe premise.
Don't blame yourself. Won't solve anything.
I should have sensed something, that it was off.
Stop.
So forget the world, enjoy the game. That's how to play Cyberpunk 2077 if you care about immersion. But also, and this is almost a political point, but games and movies and any pop culture is a reflection, if not a maker, of popular opinion. And I don't want to see people genuinely keep believing the future might be like this. Mega corporations, backstabbing, death, etc. Perhaps a lot of us are aware of the game factor and are only in these worlds to experience something different from real life. But then, why does it all look so similar to it? Why do people complain about the broken physics online? Why care so much about reality? Because, in my opinion, we unconsciously or consciously believe there is a connection and even desire this connection between our games and our reality. And I genuinely think a lot of us playing Cyberpunk will come out of it with a renewed feeling that AIs are a thing, and so is cyberspace, so is cyber stuff in general.
We take you into the cyberspace. No better place for you to interact with the construct.
I mean, cyberspace is described as this separate, infinite world that has no connection to physical life, and data is eternal.
Your consciousness, neural engrams, will be recorded as data. The rest will cease to exist.
But if you really searched, you'd know cyberspace is just another way of viewing reality that is born from computer servers, physical machines. Cyberspace is very real and not at all endless. Everything is physical, and that AI, Alt Cunningham, a failed half-digital copy of the real Alt Cunningham, Johnny's ex-sex partner / girlfriend from 50 years prior, keeps talking about how the AI have found a way to become pure data and yada yada.
You lose nothing. Cyberspace is where we awake from what we know as dreams.
Which means nothing. Data is a physical concept at its core, meaning Alt Cunningham is full of crap. And people ultimately believe these narratives, that maybe not in 2077, but in, say, 3077, that this may be our future. Am I wrong? I'd love to hear what you think in the comments. I believe that it is important not to play around irresponsibly with our fantasies, because they have more impact on our reality than we think. This might be overstepping, but I suspect sexual fantasies do also betray some aspect of your personality, even if it isn't exactly about the fantasy in question. But whatever you fantasize about, sexual or otherwise, it isn't just there. If you keep doing it, you'll modify your behavior. You'll get used to it, and eventually will believe it's almost normal, almost just part of reality. But you made it part of reality. You are the creator of the fantasy, and you can undo it or write a different fantasy. One perhaps you might want to see come to life, and not one that you expect to, based on everyone else's preconceived idea of reality. Never forget that. These guys are clearly into the Matrix movies. For those of you too young to know, The Matrix is a popular 1999 movie that talked about how the machines had taken over and created a simulation for humans to live in, so that they could harvest their energy. Which is honestly a great premise, and I still think of those movies really fondly. Although I may be wrong, you even see what I think is a little tribute to the deja vu cutscene in the first of the Matrix trilogy, a sign that the main protagonists are in a simulation, a bug of the Matrix, when, and I quote, they change something. They, referring to the agents, the programs that hunt down those that are aware they are inside a simulation. But I digress. CD Projekt Red also talks a lot about AIs in their Cyberpunk 2077 game. And this is my point of view, but I thought I might as well take the time to explain it. AIs are such a tired old story for me, like world-ending aliens or time travel. I love the sci-fi genre, but as with everything, it has to learn to grow up and get with the times. But you can't be too frustrated at CD Projekt Red, because a lot of the popular scientists or engineers, cough cough, Elon Musk, cough cough, are still peddling this simulation stuff. But in my view, the philosophy behind the idea of simulation is fundamentally flawed. And this point is very relevant, as we're also talking about the very concept of a video game, the existence of which I have seen as being the spark in many people's minds, leading them to believe that simulations are actually possible. Video games, they will shout. Just look at video games. See how realistic they are? Now imagine it like 100 years, bruh. This is an exercise in the philosophy of world building. So how is a world built? A world, as you may have noticed from the difference between a video game and your reality, is built not just on you. You are just one piece of the whole equation. Unlike the video game, where everything is made for you. That's why there are bugs, because the video game is an illusion on a screen. It is not a real world. If you just stop to think about it for a second, you'll realize the idea behind rendering, which is the process that makes video games come to life on your screen from pure code, is different to our real world. In our world, nothing is being rendered for you. There is no one central point of view that matters most. In this world, there can be no bugs because there is no proper way of functioning. There aren't hidden variables, a physics term, and there isn't any hidden code that seems to be controlling things from behind the scenes. It looks as though everything is a thing unto itself, made up of other things unto themselves. And everything has the opportunity, although not always the ability, to interact with every other thing and make, destroy, mutate, or grow into something else, depending on what two sections of reality are interacting. Therefore, our real world is unlike a computer generation that only dispenses energy to the parts around the player, the sole perspective that matters. But what the Elons of the world are probably saying isn't that our world may be like a video game. What they're saying is that we may be the creation of another world. But then I'd ask him, if this other world only began us, and then let us build ourselves, let matter at the beginning of time interact to form its own ways of behaving towards one another, then why call it a simulation? At this point, the word simulation becomes a term denoting not the way in which we were made, but the fundamental notion of what is real or not real. The term simulation would imply we are somehow fake, not real, or made in a sandbox universe kind of way, like we are secondary. I would then prefer the term creation, because whichever way we began, our world is clearly self-sustained, and so the idea of us being unequally real to something else, to another world, makes no sense at all anymore. The concept of real goes out the window. We are simply different. A creation, possibly, but different, not unreal, not simulated. As for AIs, as a creation themselves, would it not follow suit? They would not be a being, but resemble more a universe, unaware of the difference in existence between itself and its maker, because it would be trapped inside the hardware prison we had made for it, but unknowingly so. It wouldn't even be an it would just be. And then stuff would happen, as any creation implies. Therefore, AIs too, as described in this game, are unrealistic and ring hollow with me, who just thinks a little bit about the world. I'm not particularly educated in any of these subjects, but just a bit of reading, watching, and thinking leads you to understand that these concepts are old-fashioned and need to be reevaluated, at the very least, to be acceptable. No one would play a Back to the Future game these days if it tried to make you believe that flux capacitors are somehow linked to time travel. A flux capacitor sounds like it would just regulate some sort of unstable flux, probably electric in nature. Perhaps I'm the odd one out here, and everybody else just gobbles it up as believable. And hey, perhaps I'm wrong. But if I'm not, then regardless of who would play what, these ideas are shaping our vision of the future to be a bleak one. And I'm honestly not happy about it, because I genuinely believe there are certain physical impossibilities that, coupled with a truly human mindset, filled with all of our range of emotions, that would lead our future to be much more different, if not brighter, than a Cyberpunk universe video game might suggest.
River, you don't gotta go on.
Heard sob stories enough?
And if we keep believing what is not true or not plausible, we will make bad decisions. We are the makers of our fantasies, and I fantasize about a different type of future. The story in this game has its ups and downs, moments of action, and again, as with any open world, it has trouble with pace. You can select your missions whenever you want. You can finish all the side missions before all your main missions, which genuinely left me wondering why I was meeting up with Takamura after so long helping Judy save Evelyn, the client who gave you the job to find the relic in the first place, or chilling and blowing stuff up with Panam, the nomad girl I chose to be my love interest. At least in this game, I managed to make the love work. So it's not a game devoid of love. It has plenty of strong moments, And if you can pace everything correctly, it's probably a superb adventure. But because of those weird-ass percentages in the main menu you can't make heads or tails of, the constant relic malfunctioning messages on screen that happen every few in-game days, and a misunderstanding of the open world rules in this new game with its new world, you are genuinely frightened. At first, you are going to miss out on saving V, but simultaneously offered the opportunity to do anything with no clue to what might save them. And when you figure out you have all the time in the world as long as you don't do a main mission, you just chug all the side missions down, and that breaks up the pace. It's always about the pace in open world games. It somehow felt urgent, yet not urgent, to do anything, and little by little, the game mechanics appear. And this following point is why I believe Cyberpunk 2077 could have been better worked on, like many games too, by the way.
Did anyone ask your opinion?
You can feel the boundaries of the game way too much. You are constantly reminded you're in a game. The invasive red menu that's a bit simple in design, the moments when you're out of bounds and told to turn back when you reach a point that's not even the edge of the map. It's not even about the bugs. Bugs can be fixed, but NPCs that don't respond to you after a myriad of adventures together is soul-sucking.
When Randy gets back.
What's up with the generator?
I don't know, but electricity's out.
I read online someone was disappointed everyone seemed so dead, quote unquote, after doing so much stuff together. And in my second post view on this channel, I can now talk about my other big pet peeve with open world games. When you are free to move around anywhere, you are also free to see the boundaries of the game and to lose immersion, and sometimes, in some moments, even enjoyment. If you're gonna talk about simulations and AIs and the digital black wall all holding them at bay, I can suspend my disbelief. I can see the palm trees sway like weird mirages, and it wouldn't matter as much as being reminded that after a while in the game, when I want to see more and I can move to where it should be, it doesn't exist. This is a simulation after all. A real one this time. Sadly, and I blame myself a little for this, because I was so frightened of making the wrong choices for V, I went quite a bit to the internet to find out what to do. In some cases to not mess up, and honestly, with these dialogue options being hard to understand, and you never get second chances to talk things out, something that is also very unlike real life, you kind of felt inclined to. And I chose the Nomad ending, supposedly the best ending in the game, and it kind of ends bittersweet too, with you riding away from Night City with Panam, now leader of her clan, the Aldecados, because Saul, the previous leader, who was helping you to get your head fixed, got his head crushed by Adam Smasher, Johnny's old rival, cyborg extraordinaire, the final boss.
Smasher.
Told you, Johnny boy. Told you I'd end you someday.
I mean, look at that guy. He would be scary in real life.
You look like a cut of fuckable meat.
To be honest with you, I started out as a nomad because I liked the freedom aspect of it. And I went to the nomads out in the Badlands as much as possible because the sunny desert made me feel better for some reason than the swarming city. It felt more open, and I like open spaces. So most of the choices in the game were my own, not the internet's. But I wouldn't be surprised if quite a few people with no knowledge of the game mechanics were taken in directions they hadn't imagined and got a disappointing ending because they wanted an actual happy ending. I actually liked Johnny after a while. I wanted to be mates with him, and I did get to near the end. But then I was given a choice. Call my love Panam and just sort of forget Johnny, who I just spent a bunch of time making friends with and getting to know and driving his sweet car. Or trust in our friendship and have what I went online to see was a weird-ass ending where you never leave Night City, Panam isn't completely happy in Night City by your side and seems to resent you a bit, and you're the legend of Night City. Great. So I can't be friends with Johnny and want what's best for him, and Panam, who Johnny expresses concern about too, in the moment of the final choice on the rooftop. He actually says, if you go with Pan Am, people gonna die. You gotta spare them.
You can let me do that. Or you can try Pan Am and her tarmac rats. But then their lives will weigh heavy on your soul.
This may just be CD Projekt's way of warning you, but to me, it's Johnny being a good guy, getting some sort of redemption, and I can't help him. In the end, he goes to cyberspace all the same, but the scene where he does sees V acting all triumphant and not giving a shit anymore. Like I'd never had those moments with Johnny.
All packed, you wash out? Got your one-way ticket?
This funny to you?
You know, discovered one nice thing about becoming Johnny Silverhand. You stopped giving the slimmest shit about Johnny Silverhand.
And I think that's how it was written, because this is an open world game. You choose what you do, and you don't have to get to know Johnny. In the real world, you can do anything you want. You can get along with a lot of people, and if they don't like you for your affiliation with one person or group of people...
You catch a whiff of that? Smells like shit. Careful not to step in it.
You can reason with them, create a new line of thought that allows for cooperation, for friendship. You can calmly explain to them you only wish to be a good friend to everyone, and understand everyone's circumstance. And only a machine would not feel something when they realized your affection for them was the reason why you understood their enemy and wanted to befriend them too. In our world, these things are possible, but not in Cyberpunk. I'm not saying to game developers that the only thing that will satisfy me is the real world, and so what am I even doing comparing a video game to the real world? And shouldn't I just be the one to lower my standards? I'm saying that the open world type of game that is being made with freedom of the player at its center is broken and cannot be immersive for anyone looking for a transcendental storyline to carry them into a fantasy worth living in, and when the credits roll, worth mulling over. Refocus the freedom into linearity. Forbid the player from doing certain things at certain moments, and be compelling enough in your storytelling that they wouldn't care about exploring that mountain over there, because the action is just too damn good around here. But allow enough freedom to not feel like you're walking on a road. This is part of the balance between open world and great story. Don't get me wrong, making this kind of game is hard. Movies are straightforward. They need no input. It is passive. It is controlled for you. Same with books and stories spoken orally. What is special with the video game is the perspective of the player, the unknown in the equation, and making that player feel free might not be so much about physical movement, but about how you move them through the story. If you can manage to make a game that feels enough like a game to be played, enough like a world to be explored, but only worth visiting through the eyes of all perspectives, all characters, playable or non-playable, that you'd only want to visit this world with your NPC friends, and they tell you they don't want to go. It's not time to go. It makes no sense to go over there just yet. And only the story and the hidden code of your game will tell them it's now time to move on to the next rendered sequence. But shh, the player doesn't know. He doesn't care, because he really loves those guys and their stories too. Because everyone is so independent in Night City. You are solo. You do what you want, and you look beyond the boundaries, just far enough to notice this is just another game, just another city. And this is just another video. But here, there are no boundaries, because we are the makers of our own next fantasy.